Hi, my name is Rich Sciortino. I'm with a firm called Brinshore Development. We're based in Northbrook, Illinois. We develop around the Midwest. We're in 10 different states. We've built about 6,000 affordable apartments in lots of different fashions. But one of the reason I'm here today is to talk about our activities in supporting permanent supportive housing. We partnered with Thresholds on the images that you saw. It's a project in the city of Chicago that was designed originally as a 99-unit SRO. An SRO means a single room occupancy. There's no cooking or bathing facilities typically in each room. It's like a dormitory. There are usually bathrooms at the end of the hall. This one in particular was a troubled one. City acquired it. Relocated everyone out, and then issued a request for proposal from developers to redevelop it as a permanent supportive housing facility. So we partnered with Thresholds, the Chicago Botanic Garden, and a few other partners to develop what turned out to be a very special project, and one that, while it's hard to replicate, is certainly one that it hits everything that everyone is trying to do in terms of how we approach permanent supportive housing. So the way, and John mentioned this, but the way that I like to help people think about this is that permanent supportive housing is really two silos. One is first get the building built. So there's this whole capital needs of how to develop the building. The second one is because it is permanent supportive housing, people can't afford the rent to support what it costs to operate the building. So these buildings typically cost more to operate. In Chicago, it's costing us almost $7,500 per unit per year. So you figure out the math, it's not affordable for someone to rent it. So we've got to get the rent down to somewhere around, for an individual, somewhere around $300 to $350 a month. And it's impossible to do that without some form of subsidy. So in that case, the Chicago Housing Authority provided vouchers, meaning that there are subsidies for all the units, so that someone that moves in there, regardless of their income, they just pay a portion of their income. Both of those pieces, the capital piece and the operating piece, are very difficult and very competitive. So, the idea that you can replicate that requires an enormous amount of cooperation from the municipality within which it's located. The capital side is they're competing with around the state with not just permanent supportive housing, with all affordable housing. Some developers include some affordable housing in their developments, some supportive housing in their developments, but a lot don't. Most don't. Most communities don't want that kind of affordable housing. You're lucky if you can get seniors affordable housing. Permanent supportive housing and an affordable housing development is the most difficult to pass muster with residents in communities that we've found. And, if there's anything that I could say is that if there's a way for the elected officials, and I can't tell you how many times that we've come into communities where not the elected officials, but the public officials, the administrators, they're so anxious to be able to address this problem. And you come in and yes, here's where it'd be a great place for it. They find it, and we get through the process, and I always say, what about the elected officials? Tell me about the elected officials. Are they going to support this? Are they going to support it? I don't want to spend 6 months, a year, in some cases 5 years, working on these projects only to find out that the elected officials are not going to support it. And invariably, it comes down to whether or not it's going to be supported by the local elected official, the primary elected official. And so for these the elected officials and the administrators that are here today, be proactive about whether you want it or not, where you want it. If there is a place that we're working in Aurora right now with the city of Aurora, and they've identified a place, an old school, a school that's not being used. We're working with a group there called Hesed House to provide supportive housing. We're going to combine it with 15 houses that we're going to acquire through foreclosure. That's still a problem in Aurora. We're acquiring 15 houses. We're redoing the school. The school will be the primary place that we house the permanent supportive housing, as well as the offices for HESED House, the operator, as well as program services and case management. These things can be done a lot more effectively if there is cooperation from the municipality and where and how you want this developed. Because I can tell you, and this isn't my war story, but I happen to live in Wilmette, and someone is trying to put in 15 units of supportive housing, 15 units of supportive housing in Wilmette. And I came there to support the organization that's trying to do that. Room about this size and about this many people. And as a member of that community, I was ashamed of what I heard come out of people's mouths for 15 units of affordable housing in a community of 30,000. So it's difficult to develop this. It's difficult for the community to accept it. So when it's proactive and it's thoughtful about how you're going to approach it, and it's transparent. The one thing that we did with Buffett Place was we made sure that it was transparent, that we invited people in. We created opportunities for people to volunteer with gardening, so that we invited the community to come into the development. All those things are critical to getting these kinds of things developed. So I won't take any more time. It's needless to go through the vagaries of affordable housing. Just understand that it is incredibly competitive. There are probably 5 or 6 applications for every one that gets funded. So the ones that do get funded are the ones that are the best supported projects in any particular community. I don't know if there's any questions, John.
Take 2 questions.
Hi, my name is Steve Carlson. I'm Chair of Health and Community Services of the Lake County Board, but more importantly, in this context, I've been on something called the State Housing Appeals Board, the Governor's State Housing Appeals Board for the last 6 years. 4 times a year I go to the Loop, we have a meeting, we go over the minutes, we go home. The purpose of the Housing Appeals Board is for developers, as I understand it, to be able to go to that organization to appeal if they've been turned down by municipalities in ways that they feel they're unfair. Fine on paper. We have no enforcement power. We have no teeth. So, I mean, maybe this isn't a question, but that's a good place to start. Maybe for Senator Link if he's still here.
Yeah, I think that's actually starting to happen. There's a case sort of winding its way through the system from Tinley Park where the developer had all of the financing lined up, and then they pulled the plug on the project for no apparent reason, and it's now a fair housing action. So it's starting to happen. The problem is that these court cases drag on longer than the financing that you can acquire. So the financing is very particular about how it happens, when it happens. When it happens is particularly important. And so if you have 2 years, you don't have 2 years to wait for a lawsuit to wind its way through the system. So the only use for the legal system is for recourse if you were damaged in the first place. So for example, in Tinley Park, the developer lost whatever they had put in. Their damages are that they weren't able to move forward. And what does that get anybody? We have a project in Deerfield on a 10-acre parcel that a church owned that they came to us and they said, hey, we would like to build some affordable housing on our site. So we proposed a plan to build 24 units of affordable housing. And of course, there was an enormous uproar. And now all the advocacy agencies, not this particular appeal board, but all the advocacy of agencies around affordable housing are urging us to sue the city of Deerfield over this issue. And, it will take us 5 years to go through a suit like that. And you have to ask yourself as a developer, as a businessman, do you really want to spend 5 years litigating for 24 units of affordable housing? But that's really kind of what it's come to. And I think at some point something like that has to happen to force some municipalities into accepting at least a reasonable amount of affordable housing. I'm not saying that any of the communities here fall into that category, but I think that's where it's headed.
Any other elected officials first? Any other questions? Okay. Can you speak loud?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You say you with the research development group, right? What'd you say you was with? Can you say what organization you're from?
Sure, I'm with a private development company called Brinshore Development Company.
Reinsured?
Brinshore, one word, Brinshore.
There's information about their organization on some,
Okay.
Some,
I'm Googling it because I'm reading a lot of stuff on this because all these researches that's coming out and you're saying, well, elected officials need to put the money in and stuff. Our state is broke. They're not paying any more researching because they can drive around and see what's happening. We need developers to come in. This is what they want. And if you're a developer, then I can see where you're going with this, but from my understanding, listening to you, and I misheard you because I Googled the wrong company, but there was a research company, and I was getting ready to jump on that.
you'll be here though, right?
Yeah, I'm
Once
here.
once you get the right Google name, if you look, there's some
I'm ready
styrofoam
to
boards
go
out there
out
that
there
shows
and
some
get it.
stuff.
I'm ready to go out there and get it.
By the way, most of the money for the capital funds are federal sources.